As the blockade of Artsakh or Nagorno-Karabakh passes the 1-month mark, an unprecedented humanitarian crisis is unfolding. To discuss the ramifications of the blockade, I'm joined by CivilNet contributor Tigran Grigoryan. So Tigran Grigoryan, thanks again for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So we are now passing the 1-month mark that this blockade started. Can you describe the mood in Stepanakert in Nagorno-Karabakh? What are your contacts there saying to you?
Well, people are of course very worried about the situation. Now we have significant shortages of food and other supplies in Stepanakert and in other areas. You know that the government of Nagorno-Karabakh is now introducing a rationing system based on coupons. That is something surreal. We had that experience in the late 80s and early 90s in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh and in other parts of the Soviet Union. And who could have thought that in 2023, in the 21st century, people in the eastern neighborhood of the European Union could live under such conditions?
In the area where the blockade is taking place, which is the only route between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, temperatures have now dropped below sub-zero temperatures, I believe. Many reports are now circulating that the eco-protesters that were in the area, many of them have now left the vicinity, but the Azerbaijani forces, military forces, are still there. What can you tell us about the situation in this area where the blockade, the roadblock, is actually taking place?
Well, yes, there has always been an Azerbaijani military presence in this area, even before the blockade. Now the military personnel is also participating in the blockade of the road. I don't know about the presence of these so-called eco-activists, but the fact is the road is still closed. The fact is the Russian peacekeepers are not capable of opening the road, and the Nagorno-Karabakh blockade continues, and that's the most important fact. And of course, it is very telling that now the Azerbaijani side isn't even trying to conceal the fact that there is military presence there, that the military personnel is participating in this so-called protest. I believe several weeks ago, even one of the MPs of Azerbaijan was being interviewed by CivilNet, and even he back then acknowledged that military people who are based in Shushi are coming and participating in this protest when they are not at work.
And even some Karabakh officials have said that there aren't any real negotiations taking place. Armenia's foreign ministry is saying that they are still waiting for Azerbaijan to respond to various proposals from the Armenian side. There is a perception that negotiations have stalled. Have they?
Well, we should first separate the two issues, the negotiations on the opening of the Lachin corridor and the negotiations the Armenian foreign ministry is talking. I believe they are talking about the negotiations on the so-called peace deal. So in the Lachin corridor situation, I understand there are no negotiations because Azerbaijan has clear demands, and these demands are unacceptable for the Armenian side, for the Nagorno-Karabakh side. These demands are clear. They want access to these gold and copper mines. They want checkpoints on the Lachin corridor, and on a bigger level, of course, they want the Zangezur corridor. None of these demands are acceptable for the Armenian side or for the Armenian sides for very clear reasons. Because in the case of mines, we are not just talking about the mines, or we're not talking about some environmental concerns. They want to take control a huge part of Nagorno-Karabakh's territories. If you actually, when I learned about their demands, it's not just about the mines. The territory they are claiming now is like the half of the Martakert region of Nagorno-Karabakh, and it is unacceptable, and it is a part of Azerbaijani policy to take control of Nagorno-Karabakh piece by piece, and this will, of course, eventually result in the total ethnic cleansing of the territory. That's why there is no sense of negotiations on those demands. And in the case of the actual control of the Lachin corridor by the Azerbaijani side, it's the same. I mean, if there is an actual Azerbaijani presence on the corridor, then it won't be safe for the population of Nagorno-Karabakh to travel through that road or corridor, and It is clearly stipulated in the November 9 agreement that the corridor should be controlled by the Russian peacekeeping force, and Azerbaijan should provide access and safe passage to the Armenian vehicles, not just Armenian, to different vehicles going through this territory. And in the agenda of the Zangezur corridor, we know that it's a red line for the Armenian government. They are not going to compromise on this issue, even if there is a very serious humanitarian catastrophe in Nagorno-Karabakh. So Azerbaijani attempts to use the Lachin corridor as a leverage against the Armenian government won't work as well. So I believe we will have this impasse for weeks to come, because Azerbaijan is not going to open the corridor until at least some of its demands are met. And for the Armenian side, these demands are unacceptable for the reasons I've just described.
So another important question which is circulating, Tigran, is whether the Russian peacekeeping contingent, or Russia in general, is unable to get the blockade lifted in Nagorno-Karabakh, or whether it is just simply unwilling. I'm wondering what you think about this question.
I think both. At this moment, we are witnessing the implications of the war in Ukraine on the South Caucasus and on the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict itself. Since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, Russia's capabilities have both decreased in the South Caucasus. Russia has less military potential on the ground, and Russia, of course, is not willing to get involved in any kind of confrontation with Azerbaijan or Turkey, because in this case we should talk about both Azerbaijan and Turkey, because this is a tandem, a clear tandem. And there is another trend or another factor at play. Russia's dependence on Azerbaijan and Turkey have significantly increased since the onset of the war in Ukraine. Turkey is a key trading partner for Russia. It plays an important role in the process of mitigating the effects of the Western imposed sanctions. Azerbaijan is also a very important country. I think we've had opportunities to talk about the so-called North-South corridor that connects the Russian market with India through the territory of Azerbaijan and Iran. You know that 3 days before the September escalation in Armenia in 2022, Azerbaijan, Russia, and Iran signed a declaration on the development of this North-South corridor. Russia is, of course, interested in the opening of the so-called Zangezur corridor because it wants a stable land link with Turkey. And at this point, it seems that Russia is more inclined to press Armenia in this process. So Russia's capabilities have both decreased, but also there is a common interest between Russia and Azerbaijan in certain agendas, and that's why Russia is not taking any drastic measures in this situation.
Okay, and the Caucasus Research Resource Center recently published its findings from an opinion poll. The poll was conducted, however, before the blockade began. It did show, however, that the Armenian general public in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh are still vehemently opposed to Nagorno-Karabakh falling under Azerbaijani control, and they do not see that as a way to settle the conflict. Was there anything interesting or surprising you found in the poll findings, and do you think the blockade may change any of the perceptions which were found in the poll?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important finding, that even after the war, even after all the talk on the part of the government that, you know, the Armenian society supports our agenda of peace. Of course, nobody understands or knows what the agenda of peace is. The majority, not just the majority, the overwhelming majority of the population in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh are still opposed to any scenario that puts Nagorno-Karabakh under Azerbaijani jurisdiction. I think less than 1% in the case of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh said they would be okay with that scenario. That's the most important finding. The second important finding is that the people in Nagorno-Karabakh are not ready to live in Nagorno-Karabakh if there is an actual Azerbaijani control over the territory. That's very important to understand for foreign observers who are probably thinking that it is possible to find a scenario where, you know, Nagorno-Karabakh is integrated into Azerbaijan. And the third finding is, of course, the attitude towards the Russians. We see that there is a clear difference in the attitude towards the Russian peacekeeping force or the Russian state in Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. In Nagorno-Karabakh, more people trusted the Russians before this crisis. But I'm absolutely sure that after the Lachin corridor crisis, these attitudes will change. Like following the public attitudes in Stepanakert, talking to my relatives, to my friends there, I see a clear distrust towards the actions of the Russian government or the Russian peacekeeping force. So probably we will need to conduct another survey after this entire situation, this entire crisis is resolved.
And I also want to ask about your opinion of the performance and also the presence of Ruben Vartanian, the state minister of Karabakh, which is a position akin to prime minister. He hasn't been in the position for long. Some say that he has been using his international connections to raise awareness of what's happening right now in Nagorno-Karabakh, but a lot of Azerbaijani officials have complained about his presence in Stepanakert and have been calling for him to resign. How would you rate his tenure so far?
Let's start from the Azerbaijani narrative. It's part of their official propaganda. They try to present a situation where they say there was a genuine peace process between Azerbaijan and Stepanakert, between Baku and Stepanakert. There were like conversations going on about some sort of integration of Nagorno-Karabakh into Azerbaijan. And then Ruben Vartanian came, or was sent, as they say, and this process stalled. This is absolutely false. There was no any kind of peace process between Nagorno-Karabakh and Azerbaijan before Ruben Vartanian's arrivals. There were certain types of negotiations on certain practical issues, like the water resource management, and these were quid pro quo negotiations. Like the Nagorno-Karabakh side was giving something to Azerbaijan, and the Azerbaijani side was giving something in exchange. So it wasn't like Nagorno-Karabakh was integrating into Azerbaijan, or there was this negotiation or talks around the construction of the alternative route of the Lachin corridor. Well, it is understandable and it is clear that when an Azerbaijani company builds a road controlled by the Karabakh authorities, there should be negotiations going on over safety, over security, and so on. These negotiations are not part of some sort of peace process, are not part of the integration process Baku is talking about. So it's an absolute nonsense that, we nearly agreed with the Karabakh Armenians and Ruben Vartanian came and spoiled everything. Regarding Ruben Vartanian's performance, I think it's too early to talk about his actual performance on the ground, meaning his managerial role, his management, his governance, and so on. But in terms of public relations, I'm quite impressed. I mean, he's using his personal contacts and his personal ties in the West, and not just in the West, but also in the Russian liberal circles, to raise awareness about the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. Not every politician in Armenia, even in Armenia, can call Ian Bremmer and have an interview with him about the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. That's a real asset that he has been using very effectively.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Tigran, I want to ask, the Karabakh president, Arayik Harutyunyan, dismissed the head of the Security Council, General Vitali Balasyan, from his position and replaced him with Major General Arat Melkumyan. I'm wondering what you thought about this move.
Yeah, there are lots of narratives coming from Azerbaijan about that decision as well. So the Azerbaijani narrative goes that Vitali Balasyan was the leader of the peace party in Stepanakert who wanted to participate in this so-called integration process. It is interesting because just a year ago, President Aliyev was complaining about Vitali Balasyan during high-profile meetings that Balasyan was making some sort of hawkish statement saying that we need to return Shushi and Hadrut, and President Aliyev was complaining about him. This is like an insane information. Now they are trying to portray Balasyan as some sort of peace dove, which is of course not the case. Vitali Balasyan was an official who was trying to pursue the national interests of Nagorno-Karabakh, and he was in a very difficult position because he had to negotiate with his Azerbaijani counterparts on the issues we have already discussed, on the issue of the construction of the alternative route of the Lachin corridor, and he was heavily criticized for that in Armenia and in Nagorno-Karabakh. So I don't think that his appointment or his dismissal has anything to do with these narratives which are coming from Azerbaijan. I think a new government is being formed in Nagorno-Karabakh, and of course the new leadership wants to work with people with whom they feel comfortable.
Okay, wow, Tigran, very insightful. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on CivilNet.